by the law enforcement officer. He was dealing with mental illness. And a lot of times we don't understand, and law enforcement doesn't understand how to deal with those individuals that they come across with mental illness. And so he was shot and killed. And so today we honor his memory, because we all know that he should still be with us today if it wasn't but for law enforcement not truly understanding mental health illness in the Black community. So while we're celebrating and we are saddened by his death, we still have a job to do. We must go out in our communities and begin to talk about what is happening in the Black community when it comes to mental health. Because a lot of our children are traumatized. You know, just yesterday, my field director, she called me and she said that her boyfriend brother just killed himself. He was an ex-felon. He couldn't find a job because every application he filled out rejected him due to the fact that he's an ex-felon. How many young men out here today that are struggling with trying to survive as a result of being an ex-felon and cannot get a job? Imagine not being able to put food on the table for your family. So this is a celebration, while at the same time, this is a movement. We are here to make a movement occur in the city of St. Louis, because we can no longer allow for our young men and women to fall prey to mental health illness. So in closing with my rant and rave, I just again want to thank each and every one of you for being here, because it's very, very important that we understand what's happening in our community. We have trailblazers in our community that are doing fantastic things. And one will be honored tonight. And he's my brother. And he deals with mental illness. He struggled with mental illness and trauma each and every day. But he still wakes up. He gets up and he keeps fighting the fight, because he knows at the end of the day, you cannot stop. You have to keep fighting. And that's my brother, who's a state representative, who's a brother that was on the front line, was sprayed on, was beaten, Bruce Franks. Let's give it up for my brother, Bruce Franks. The way he look at his hair. Red hair. You know, they call him Oops. He's a battle rapper. But not only that though, he's a family man. He cares so much about his children. King? Who know King? Raise your hand. If you know King, raise your hand. Yeah. King is his main man. That's his main man. So Bruce, I just want to say, I appreciate you, brother. I love you for all you do. And even when times get hard, man, at the end of the day, know that you are fighting for a greater and a bigger cause. And that is a cause for liberation and for everyone to have the same equal equality that one deserves in this country. So thank you very much. Let's give it up for our brother here.
Abdul-Wakil Kamal Memorial Foundation is presenting Bruce with the Community Service Award. Met somebody I can vote for 4 more times. State Rep Bruce Franks, in a minute we're going to be calling him State Senator.
That's what's up, baby. That's what we're going to do. He's taking my seat.
He just showed up, and he just showed up for me, for Muhammad, for Abdul, whom he never met. And I feel somewhat connected to him because he's just such a young brother, and he just reminds me of what Abdul could have been if given the opportunity to do. So, for that, brothers, thank you.
Pretty award. I've never received anything like that. I'm a damn senator. Look at that. Look how beautiful that is. And so we have an organization that's been on the forefront, you know, fighting a good fight. The organization that I'm about to talk about truly understands that you have to go deep in the roots, because you can keep chopping a tree down, but if the roots, you don't pull them up, that tree is going to keep growing. And so the organization, they do many of things, from feeding the homeless to taking care of those young men and women who was pushed out of the system, public school system, from putting monies behind organizations that they care about, to sending aid across this country, because they truly know that we're not just regional, we're national when it comes to the conditions of poor black people. And that organization is none other than 2 Deaf. Let's give it up for 2 Deaf. You know, when you call them, they come. They don't ask no questions. They just show up because they're ready to do the work of the people. So I just want to say personally, thank you, Addie. Thank 2 Deaf for all that you do in this community and all that you will continue to do. And know that our community would never thrive if it wasn't but for people like this organization. They don't ask for nothing. They take money out of their own pockets. And so I'm going to have to find them some money, okay, as an organization. I'm going to have to find some money for them. And I will, you believe that. So, on that note, I appreciate all you do. Thank you, Nadia, for acknowledging their accomplishments and all they do in this community.
Now, 2 Deaf, our story is kind of crazy. We said we wanted to help people that were in Texas and had been affected by Hurricane Harvey. And the call went out, and oh my God, they just showed up. They was everywhere. This building, we were able to get like 20,000 items to Texas. And this is only a fraction of them. Yeah. You know, we don't have enough chairs. They can't enough chairs to fill them up. They show up every time. They're very passionate about the survivors of domestic violence. But that's not all that they do. And so I am just honored, really, just to know all of them. All of them. They show up. So those are the kind of people I be around. So y'all in this room, guess what? Y'all my favorite people. And so thank you so much for all that you do. And from us to you.
This is what community life looks like. This is it. You want to sit first? Yeah, we're going to take here. Who's taking the pictures? So while they're taking the pictures.
Come back there.
What?
He's taking one today.
Okay, we got it. Okay. Okay, let's give it up for two down. But I would be remiss if I didn't thank Nadia. I would be remiss if I didn't thank my sister for her commitment to our community, because she's not even from here. Where are you from, girl?
I was born in Jersey.
You can still hear the accent. But you know, she came to St. Louis, she rolled up her sleeves, and she got to work. She aligned herself with like-minded people who truly cares about this city. Because one thing about us as a collective, we all want one thing for our city. That's a safer community, a community that's equitable across neighborhoods, and it's a community that we all want to be proud of. Am I wrong or right? That's what we want for our community. We don't want no more, no less. And so, you know, she's that one that's really willing and able to champion that cause. But behind every good woman, there's a good man. Behind every good man, there's a good woman. Am I right or wrong? You're right. Yeah. So Muhammad, bring yourself on up here. Come on up here, Muhammad. This guy right here, he trained dogs. He put up signs. He take care of all of his women and his family. And not only that, he supports me. And so I support him back because we are loyal when it comes to relationships. From which we've come, we're very loyal. And so I just want you to join me in giving Muhammad a round of applause for all of his hard work and dedication to the city of St. Louis. That's my brother. We don't call him the first man.
So Muhammad and I have been on this ride, oh God, nearly 30 years. And when I first met him,
She don't like this.
I
love
was a mini skirt wearing, which is probably what attracted him. But what attracted me to him is I seen my father in him. And long ride. And not all of it good, but if the other day he told me, you don't never pull over. He said, sometimes I need to pull over. And I said, you know what? But that's okay. Because I can drive. I can do them 12, 13, 14 hours. And so we don't have to. And when he lost Abdul, when we lost Abdul, I seen that light go out of his eyes, but the drive is still there. Because when we lost one Abdul, we have gained so many more Abduls. And it is because of you, I don't pull. I love you.
Wow. That's deep. But again,
Sorry. Go ahead. We vote on that. That's why we do wrong. After the senator finishes wrapping it up, we're going to, food is available, drinks are available, and then you're going to ask the panel list, this, yes, yeah, to get on over here, and then we're going to open this thing up. We want y'all to be engaged. We want y'all to hear the message, because everybody in this room could be the change that we want to see.
Yeah.
so again, as a senator representing this area, I would like to say thanks to each and every one of you that took time out of your schedule to be here, because this is a very, very diverse crowd. And this is what America looks like.
Yes.
This is what community looks like. And so, on behalf of Abdul that's not here anymore, I would like to say to each and every one of you, don't let his death be in vain. Continue to fight against oppression. Continue to fight against bigotry. Continue to fight against hatred. Because as you see, each and every day is a lot of it happening under Donald Trump. We are the ones that's going to take this city and this country back. We are the ones that's going to make America great again. Because at the end of the day, it's going to be all for Abdul and the many young men and women that was gunned down by the hands of the individuals that were supposed to protect and serve us. Thank you very much.
Hello, and welcome to this wonderful assembly of people, knowledge, and expertise. I would like to take a moment to acknowledge the members of our panel. And so we have with us today first Ms. Amy Hunter. She is an activist, organizer, and diversity, inclusion, and racial justice educator. We have Dr. Christy Griffin, who is the founder and president of the Ethics Project and author of Incarceration in Black and White, The Subjugation of Black America. I will be buying my copy tonight, if my mama lends me some money. And hopefully you guys will be buying your copy as well, because Dr. Griffin does have a few copies for us. We have Bruce Franks, activist and state representative, and tonight an awardee from the Abdul-Wakil Kamal Foundation, so congratulations. We have Peter Meredith, who is a state representative for the 80th District, a lawyer, and a neighborhood organizer. We have Marshada Carradine Randall, who is a writer, educator, advocate, activist, and parent educator. We have Senator Jamila Nasheed from the state of Missouri, who is also an activist. She's involved in a lot of different things, and I have had the pleasure of meeting her in quite a few of those things. And then we also have Shaquila. Just making sure. This is Nadita's daughter, but she also brings knowledge, expertise, and care to us as well. So thank you all so much for being here. The purpose is to bring a better understanding of the history and impact of mass incarceration in cash bail in communities of color, as well as informing attendees of actionable steps they can take to improve our system. So our format is that while I do have some questions that are addressed to specific members of our panel, everyone is encouraged to respond once that individual has a chance to answer. Occasionally, I may redirect a question in the interest of time to ensure that we fulfill the purpose of this discussion. As all of you are probably aware, Nadita has given us all instructions. So, my instructions for tonight, we're going to make sure that you guys first have an outline for what the issue is. Secondly, look at the impact of this on various communities and individuals within those communities. And then finally, to be able to walk away with action steps. What can we as individuals do in order to contribute our best selves to this particular issue? So, Please note that while we want people to learn as much as possible, we also acknowledge that within an hour's time, we are limited in our scope and ability. And so for this reason, we want to briefly answer questions. But most importantly, arm people with resources so they can research, and, for instance, your book, Dr. Griffin, so that we can research further and learn more once we leave this event. I'll begin with Dr. Griffin. In my research, I came across this quote from you. From the time of the Emancipation Proclamation, incarcerations are about one singular goal: increasing the wealth of the wealthy. Until the narrative is changed and the truth becomes the conversation, everyone is simply spinning wheels. So because we don't want to spin our wheels tonight, let's focus on the truth. How do mass incarceration and cash bail systems benefit the wealthy and, on the opposite end, harm the poor, particularly here in the St. Louis area?
Well, thank you very much. Can you hear me? Yes. Well, it benefits the wealthy because, of course, it perpetuates a system that continues to feed their wealth. The entire system is designed from the perspective of privatized prisons, or even those that are run by the government. There are still a large number of private industries that profit from our prison system. So we have to look at the monetization and the profitability of the prison systems, because if we don't look at that perspective, again, we're simply spinning wheels, and we're often looking at those who have been pulled into the system as opposed to those who are perpetuating the system, and as a result, we are less safe. The cash bail system, as well as other aspects of the criminal justice system, continues to keep people impoverished, and because of that, it keeps them within that system, either because they are unable to get out of a lockdown or in some type of holdover, or because they are unable to become employed once they are forced to what they feel like plead guilty to what is suggested by often public defenders to lesser crimes. I could go on and talk for hours how it impacts the community and continues to impoverish communities, but those are just a few of the ways.
Basically, we want to look at how this system continues to help the wealthy while harming the poor, particularly here in the St. Louis area. So Dr. Griffin gave a great explanation, but.
So that is a fantastic question. What has happened throughout the decades and the centuries when it comes to poor Black people incarcerated? There's a system that occurs in this country that allows for people to be enslaved in the penal system. And it's the 13th Amendment. How many of you are familiar with the 13th Amendment? Raise your hand. So the 13th Amendment basically states that there is no slavery or servitude except with the exception of being in prison. So slavery still exists in America if you are convicted of a crime or imprisoned. And so a lot of Black people they don't even understand the 13th Amendment and how it impacts their quality of life. So if you committed a crime, you can still be enslaved. And so what does that enslavement look like? It looks like individuals locked up, they're in prison, they're creating and they're promoting and they're actually working for industries that would never support them when they are out of prison. So they're making furniture, they're making license plates, they're doing everything inside the prison that individuals would never even give them the opportunity to work when they're out. And so my question to so many young men and women, do you want to work to make $8 an hour versus $8 a month? And that's what they do. And so we have to educate our people that the penal system is a game of chess, that they can never play it because they have mastered the game of chess. And so when you have individuals that are out here reaping havoc, selling dope, and everything up under the sun, that they will soon be a part of the slave master system due to the 13th Amendment, because they will be a slave. Google, everyone in here, Google the 13th Amendment. It says you cannot have slavery or any servitude with the exception of being a criminal. So slavery still exists. How do we get our young black men and women to understand that they are only pawns in the game? We have to change the narrative.
So, I'm Shaquila, as they already said. I work at the Bell Project, which is a nonprofit organization here in St. Louis, where we're posting bails free for people that's being held on pretrial. And I mainly handle all the data. So since February, we've bailed out 1,020 people. What I've noticed is that between St. Louis County Jail, St. Louis City, and the workhouse, is over 96% of just black people that are being held because just they've been accused of a crime, not because they were found guilty or anything like that, and they can't afford bail. Now, like the senator said, if you look at your amendments, there are certain amendments that says that bail should not be anything that cause any hardship on you. However, if you're coming from St. Louis, North Side, South Side, West Side, or any of those, you can't afford $30,000 out of cash. And if you could, then you're gonna have a whole new case, because where did you get that from? So in St. Louis, it's extremely hard, what I'm noticing, because any other sites that the Bell Project is at, bail does not come anywhere near close to how much our bail is. And ours doesn't have to be any proof of you committing that crime. You literally can go to a precinct right now and say, the senator did such and such to me, and she will be arrested. No questions. And be held until they prove that they got a little bit of evidence to hold her, and then you're gonna go and get your bail amount. And they are actually telling people, do not ask for a lower bail. The bailiffs are saying that. That's once again another crime, because you are allowed to ask the judge to lower your bail. You are allowed to say that this is calling financial hardship on you and your family. But the bailiffs are telling you not to do it. So I think the more that we educate our people, especially in St. Louis, since black people are the minority, but we're the majority in the institutions. So we need to educate them so that they know full well what every right they have.
So, piggybacking off something that Dr. Griffith said, we got to be real about who's making money and why they're making money. And so when we talk about our Department of Corrections, for instance, not only, we have all these different contracts where so many people make so much money off of folks being incarcerated, particularly black folks being incarcerated. You have Horizon, right? Horizon across the United States has 90% of our contracts when it comes to our healthcare inside our prisons. We pay them $13.34 per prisoner per day. They make about $150 million a year, and they don't do $150 million worth of work. And so when you look around the United States, and there are many class action lawsuits, we've had many cases here in Missouri that basically fell at the hands of Horizon. And even when you go further than that in the city of St. Louis, something that Senator Nasheed and I was working on last year with a couple of Republican senators, was this reimbursement method that we have. The way our reimbursement method works from the workhouse and to whereas you have to be convicted in order for the city to get reimbursed. You have to go to the Department of Corrections. So they can hold somebody for a year, 2 years, right? And if that person is just let out, if they're dropped or whatever it is, then the state doesn't get reimbursed. So in my opinion, our opinion, as we were talking, the longer you keep somebody, absolutely for no reason, then they plead out to something small, and maybe even if they didn't do it because they've been in jail for a year or 2 years, and we're talking about folks who don't have certain resources, who don't have the counsel that they need, and we have an underfunded public defender system. So it's this kind of revolving circle around stripping, our inmates of their resources, and then they go and then they get reimbursed. So I feel like if we cut a lot of that, if we started to do kind of our own in-state thing when it came to our healthcare and not contracting out and paying $150 million a year and having a better reimbursement method, we wouldn't have kind of those incentives to keep folks incarcerated either.
I'm going to add a couple things, if that's right. First of all, the $13 a day that we spend on healthcare for prisoners, I can't help but think about if we were to spend the amount of money we spend per day on prisoners in poor communities per person, how many people we'd actually keep out of prison in the first place. That's one of many illustrations here of how our criminal justice system is not designed right now to prevent or reduce crime. It is truly designed, as Dr. Griffin said, to keep people in poverty, to keep certain groups in poverty and to keep others at a different class. To that quote, I would say that cash bail seems to me like about the most obvious illustration of that fact that this is about treating only certain communities, poor communities, via the criminal justice system. Because the reality is, cash bail means if you have the money, you're not going to jail. There is, in my mind, very little justifiable explanation for the idea that if you have money, you wouldn't be in jail right now. That is just. That is not just at all. That is a way to make sure that people that have the money don't pay the consequences for laws that they put in place in order to imprison other populations. And I think that's at the heart of all of these problems in our criminal justice system. So I'm really glad that that's sort of the center of what we're talking about here today.
All right, is there any way I can get the second mic live? Yes, ma'am.
So with the Senate, you add amendments to what you want to do. So I will also say this here, is that we have to change the dynamics in our community when it comes to poor people. Because if you don't educate them, you're going to incarcerate them. There's no in between. We have children graduating from the kindergarten to the 12th grade, not knowing how to read on the 3rd grade level. And we haven't taken the public school system to task when it comes to our children. With the exception of one county, it was a one state, they are now suing the educational system, the public school system, because they have failed to educate children. And so the question that I have when it comes to our children and education and incarceration is, how do you educate a kid and pass them from one grade to the next, knowing that they cannot read and write on a third grade level, and not expect them to get caught up in a criminal justice system? How do we do that to them? Because so many of our children are not equipped to be able to compete in a global economy when it comes to math and science. They're below proficiency. The industrial bubble burst, the manufacturing bubble burst. Now we have a technology bubble that hasn't burst, and our children, poor black kids, are not even equipped to go after those jobs because they have had education that is inferior in the St. Louis public school system. So we can talk about incarceration, and we can talk about how people take advantage of us when we get incarcerated, but how do we talk about, and how do we begin to talk about educating our kids so that they don't have to be incarcerated, so that they can compete in a global economy, so that they can go out and get jobs and be able to provide for their families? That's the conversation we need to have.
I think that helps to really transfer to the question that I actually have for Ms. Hunter, Ms. Karen Randall, which basically was to talk about the educational system and how this impacts particularly children and families of color.
So I guess I would say a couple of things. We're not asking big business to do anything different, and we could. So we have major corporations. BJC is the largest employer in the state of Missouri outside of the state of Missouri. If we have gun violence in 63113, we should be blaming them. They're not employing the people who live in that community. They're not funding the schools in that community. And let me be clear, so black kids are not safe in any educational system, and they're being hazed and harmed in every educational system. All educational systems are racially hostile environments. So that first acknowledgement, I know that hurts people's feelings because they're like, oh, these poor white teachers, they cry if I call them racist, but like, here's the deal. The educational system is racist. We study way too much about European history than we ever should. It's not even a continent. It isn't the most populated space in the world. And so thinking about a global education that actually would represent kids of color, because people of color are the global majority, which would also be a mirror to them about how brilliant they are born. There's nothing wrong with the children in St. Louis City or County, but we have failed educational systems and then big corporations that keep this in play. So Enterprise, Rent-A-Car, for example, has your commissaries in prisons. They make money off the commissaries. So think about that the next time you're going to rent a car, for example. You know, there are lots of ways, but on my end, because I work on the corporate side, there's no reason why we should ask the question if you've ever been incarcerated unless your incarceration has something to do with your work. But the idea that we have a whole system that we've all kind of bought into, like, yeah, but if you broke the law, you can never really work anywhere again, is it's the same system regurgitated over and over again. So parents that are working are less stressed, they can provide for their families, and we have employers. So I want to think about like, the whole system and how it's working. It serves major corporations well to keep the racism that exists in educational systems exactly where it is, because all of their children will be employed by the companies they currently work for. I'm just saying. And so we're talking about trauma-informed care, which is just another pimp on poverty, right? racism is traumatizing. So if we were really gonna work with kids on how their parents have been incarcerated, we'd fix all the systems that cause that moment to happen in that moment. Because white people break the law every day. They shoplift, they do drugs. There aren't enough drugs in America for all the black people. We're not running anything drug related, right? We don't have any planes, we're not. Our communities are over-policed, and we have to start talking about that. Our children are over-policed, their bodies are over-policed, they're being, preschools where black boys get suspended and expelled the most, so before they ever enter the school system. 3 years old, 4 years old, we're kicking kids out of preschool, y'all. And that's part of our system, and we justify it by, oh, they have a bad behavior. White kids have bad behaviors too, and we could call it all other kinds of stuff. Bad morning, test him, oh, he's gifted. That's what we say about bad white kids. They're gifted. Put them in the gifted program, they're not challenged enough. No, absolutely not. I live in University City. University City is still majority white in the gifted programs. You cannot honestly believe that every white child in University City is gifted. That makes no sense. It's a majority black school. None of the black kids are gifted. Only the black kids who have two parents are gifted. The system is broken. If the gifted teachers are so awesome and amazing, let me be clear, there aren't more than 3 or 4 actually gifted kids in any district here in St. Louis. So if you think you are, or you think your child was, they're probably not. Yeah, they're probably not. They're probably just smart and very resourced. I know it hurts people's feelings when I say that, but that's the truth. That is the truth. The gifted program is just another way that we segregate kids out of school. It's economic and it's racialized, right? And so thinking about how we're gonna switch this here in the city means that we ask for the big orders. My issue here in St. Louis is that we dream so tiny. We just want white people to be nice to me. I don't care if white people are nice to me. I want black people to be liberated here in St. Louis, which means we ask for the tall order. We should be heading these major corporations, not just working for them. We can't even imagine that. And that will be the legacy we leave for our children. All right.
As an educator, as Amy was just speaking on, the domino effect of the whole school to prison pipeline and writing our children up for every single thing that they do is more than a notion that has pushed me out of education. It has pushed me out of education. Because of the paper trail that follows our children with the school resource officers, as Amy said, over policing our children. All of that must be eradicated because really we're just criminalizing what America legislates on our children in our inner city communities.
And let me say this here, I totally agree with you because, I grew up in the Doris Webby housing projects. And that is the projects that you don't ever want to live in. My mother committed suicide when I was only 2 years old. My father escaped the Vietnam War and was shot by way of a drive-by shooting while she was pregnant 9 months with me. And I was that bitter kid. I was the kid that we're talking about right now. I was that kid that didn't believe in God. I was that kid that was reaping havoc throughout this city. The Strassenfest, the VIP fair, wherever. I was that kid. And at the tender age of 14, I stabbed someone close to her heart because I was in a gang. And I stabbed that kid close to her heart. And I was a juvenile delinquent. I was in and out of the juvenile detention home. And they told my grandmother that there's no way in hell you can raise her because she's out of control. The system is going to take you. My grandmother pleaded, begged. And I can tell you what brings a change in this community is that you have to breathe hope in kids. You have to breathe life in these kids to believe that they can be something far, far greater than their environment. Because all I saw was drug dealers and women that was waiting on a first-of-the-month check to go get their hair done. And their children was going from one door to the next. Do you have cheese? Do you have sugar? Do you have pinto beans or black? I mean, that's what we had in the projects. And it wasn't but for Anthony Shaheed, the Taheed Youth Group, that would come down there every Wednesday and instill pride in us. We would smoke weed, we would drink 40 ounces, but Wednesdays, we said, here come these Malcolm X niggas. Let's clean up that area, because they on their way down here. But they were still breathing, and they were still planting a seed in the people that grew up in the projects. I was pushed out of the public school system because they said, you are too far behind in your credits. There's no way you're gonna catch up. And they pushed me out of the system. But let me tell you this here. Now I'm a woman that was breaking laws to a woman making laws. And I'm gonna tell you this here, that if I can do it, anyone can. Because I didn't have a mother. I didn't have a father. My grandmother was semi-literate. And I still made it because there were people that believed in me. We have to instill in our young people who don't have mothers and who don't have fathers to teach them the right way, that we can believe in them. The only way we're going to change the dynamics in our city when it comes to our black people is that we have to catch them wherever they are and give them hope. Because hope is what changes lives. Fear is what cultivates strength and growth. And we see it every day. Barack was our hope. Donald Trump is our fear. People breathe hope and fear because they know that that is what motivates a people. And so the question is, where are we? How do we change the dynamics when it comes to hope, values, and principles? Because at the end of the day, I'm going to close it out. At the end of the day, people can't do to us what we don't let them do to us. We can change the dynamics with black men and women when we give them hope and give them pride. Because when they are prideful and they have hope, they ain't falling into the traps of a criminal justice system. They refuse to. So, on that note, let's go reach our children and give them hope.
One of the things that I really want to stress as an educator myself, I left, same thing, I was kind of pushed out in a way from teaching. And in the end, one of the things we really have to stress is that mass incarceration doesn't just start with an adult. It starts with our kids. And so I myself, when we look at the school to prison pipeline, what Ms. Hunter was talking about, when we have 3 and 4-year-olds being suspended from school, and then this becomes a pattern where this child is labeled, and on top of that, and it really ends up being about the fact that some teacher does not want to take the time to learn more about that student. then it becomes a problem. One of the biggest things that people, that the research shows as an indicator of success is, for African American students, is whether or not they had an African American teacher. And the statistics in the Missouri education system is abysmal. I spoke at Truman State University a couple of years ago, and 100% of the people in the teacher education program was white. In the state of Missouri, only 5% of all teaching candidates are African American. Actually, only 5% are people of color at all. Okay? So when we look at mass incarceration, one of the things we also have to be looking at and focusing on is what are we doing from the beginning to ensure success for these students so that, and for these kids so that they don't enter the system in the end. As a matter of fact, in the state of Missouri, the last time I could find that the issue of bail was touched was in 2012. In 2010, the Department of Insurance, Financial Institutions, and Professional Registration released a report on the Missouri bail bond system. The committee's report, released on January 6, 2010, outlined a number of areas of improvement, but most of them dealt with expanding and empowering the bail bond system. Not with suggestions for making it easier for the average citizen to navigate the system. The 2012 legislation was simply intended to reassure that the bail bondsman industry continued to be viable. However, these last few years have seen progress in other states, not in our state. For instance, in California, where Governor Brown recently signed a law ending the cash bail system effective October 1st, 2019. From this point forward, instead of paying to be released pre-trial, defendants will be assessed on their risk to public safety, then be released or held accordingly. And so, I know we have several attorneys here on the panel as well. How would a law like this look for individuals here in the state of Missouri?
I didn't really get the question either. However, from several statements ago, I want to go back to the original statement that we have to look at the profitability of this system because we still are looking at the child. We're looking at the educational system as the problem as opposed to how the profitability of incarceration impacts those systems so that you do have a child that no matter what happens in the public school system, you have a child whose mind is on the fact that when they woke up that morning, their father was no longer there. Their mother may not any longer be there. That in order to sustain their home and their income, that mom is now bringing home uncles that are now helping themselves to brothers and sisters and you. And then you're expected to go into the classroom and learn. There is no system that is going to address that. We have to stop locking up people and to go back to it's not just those, and there are people obviously that are committing crimes. We can't ignore the fact that there are people who are legitimately committing crimes. Many of them are committing crimes because they are unable to find legitimate work. They are unable to establish businesses because businesses require relationships with people who have money, who can actually contribute to the success of that business. So you have people who don't have someone like your grandmother, with or without an education, loves you dearly and encouraged you. And that's one of the most important things that we can do. When we see children, rather than calling them thugs and all other kinds of names, I sat in a church and listened to our children by pastors being called hood rats and all kinds of things, as opposed to seeing that child in need of direction and in need of what has been taken from our home. This historically has been going on since slavery. They abolished slavery. They came back with the 13th Amendment that allowed that loophole. We had convict leasing that allowed them to literally accuse anyone, one, to create black laws in the first place. That it was literally illegal to walk down the street and not step aside into the street when a white person approached you. A myriad number of laws in order to incarcerate you, charge you all kinds of fees, which is replicated to this day, and then literally lease you back out to what was often your own slave master before emancipation. There are more black people enslaved in prisons right now as we speak than at the time the Emancipation Proclamation was signed. More right now. But they're out in rural cities. I literally drove past one where they created a town the way you might remember a commercial with Sherry Belafonte. I will never forget it. It was from Master Charge. And as a bankruptcy attorney, I found it very offensive because she was in an empty room and she snapped her fingers and the room filled up with furniture. Does anyone remember that? Am I the only person who remembers that? I remember that. You remember that? Thank you. I actually saw a town created in that same way. Literally, the entire town was being built to support the prison system. Gas stations were going up, restaurants were going up, housing and hotels were going up, at the same time to support the prison system. So we have to look at why the system exists, as opposed to the fact that we're putting so much of the responsibility on the child and thinking that we can tell them to do better. Depression presents itself in children as hyperactivity. So if you have someone in a classroom who doesn't relate to a black child to begin with, and a child cannot control that behavior, we have Big Pharma who legislatively is feeding our children drugs to address the symptoms as opposed to the problem. And then you have teachers that are now in those classrooms who don't relate and many don't care. And I want to say I have met many teachers who do care. And before I forget, I want to say that I will be making a beeline out of here. I'm not being antisocial, but I'm actually conducting a National Youth Summit tomorrow and Tuesday with 150 children from all over this region. They have been entrusted to me, and I have a lot of work that I still have to do before I get up at 6 o'clock in the morning, and Muhammad comes and helps me get everything over to Umzul in order to do this. But there are so many aspects of this, and we cannot just expect our children to learn when their minds are on so many traumas that they experience, and many of those traumas are the result of mass incarceration and the impact that it has in our community.
So to answer your question, we just had a discussion about California, how they ended cash bail. And honestly, it's not good. Everyone thinks that because cash bail ended, that's a win, but it's a loss. Because if you're doing a risk assessment on someone, you're still looking at paper. You're not looking at that individual. So there's a lot of things that may be similar, but does not mean it pertains to you as a person. And there's we had a discussion last week with the judge, which I won't name since they just got re-entered again from our election. But that judge actually said they don't even look at the person's name, they don't look at their background, they don't look at anything, they just look at the charge. And that's what they assess the bail off of. So when you have people that are not taking into consideration any of the factors that come with this charge, then how can you say that just ending cash bail was a good thing? So there's a couple of other states that are also considering what California did. And from the Bell Project point of view, that's not good because of course that would take us out of business and that'll potentially have a lot of people still being incarcerated. And a lot of people don't understand that 1.6 million people every day are being incarcerated off of pretrial alone. So if you're looking at 1.6 million a day, how many of them people do you actually think will be returned home to their children or to their significant other if you just do a risk assessment? Which the risk assessment is automatically going to be racially biased because it's going to look at what community they went to, what their income is, if they have any other past things behind them. That's the same thing that a parole board might look at. And you know most parolees don't get sent home, especially if you want to go back to the same environment that you committed your crime. So these are not things that we actually want to happen in our community because it's just another form of keeping us in prison.
Can I say, she's so correct. Because this conversation is taking me way back in thought. You know, I owned a bookstore for 10 years trying to educate Black people from which they've come. And I received an award from the DEA. The DEA called me and said that they wanted to give me an award. I'm like, why in the hell would the DEA want to give me an award? So I went anyway. And I went and I received the award. But I was remiss to not articulate what I truly felt. I said, if capitalism is real in America, capitalism is real in America. And if it wasn't but for capitalism, we wouldn't have individuals bringing tons and tons and tons of cocaine and heroin and guns in the Black community. Because they know if a person has their back against the wall and they can't find no other way, they're going to pick up the guns, they're going to pick up the heroin, and they're going to pick up the crack. Okay, you remember Noriega, right? But at the end of the day, though, I told them that capitalism is alive and well because if it wasn't but for drugs, guns, the diamond industry won't make it. The clothing industry wouldn't make it. The malls wouldn't make it. The car dealerships wouldn't make it. Because a lot of those individuals who provide resources for those companies are drug dealers and those individuals that's living a criminal lifestyle. Rich people, they don't spend a lot of money. They save their money. They invest their monies into the stocks. So they ain't spending a lot of money. They will wear ugly, torn out tennis shoes for months to come. But we as a race of people have to know that we're only pawns in the game. That until we realize that we're pawns in the game, only then will we understand that the criminal justice system doesn't work for Black people when it comes to making them free and Black people that truly understands what America economy looks like.
Thank you. I'm sorry. It is space of time because we've got about a half an hour, and I know that Christy, I know all of you. First of all, I appreciate every single one of you showing up. I mean, that's important to me. People who I can reach out and touch means a whole lot to me. And for the entire panel, and I want to start with Representative Franks, where do we go from here? So we know that cash bail is a problem, as stated by my daughter up there. And we know that mass incarceration is a problem. So the reason I wanted to do this talk today was because in my research for it, in the state of Missouri, in the last 30 years, we have not decreased at all individuals that are incarcerated in 30 years. And that we are in the top 10 states in which that occurs. So I want you to take all of what everybody on the panel has said, but what I want you to also do is work within your community and with other organizations that are doing this work. Because people are being locked up that because they have mental sickness, right? People are being locked up, not charged with anything because they're black, right? I want you, especially all of those, our allies, I want you to be my accomplice. I don't need any allies. I don't need any more friends. I need you to be down in this with me. And I know there are so many organizations out there that are doing the work, but for all of, especially all of my white allies, when you speak, some of us live. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Stop being scared to have this conversation with your husband, your wife, your kids, at your dinner table, in your workplace, because they hate seeing me at work. Every day, all day. I'm on it. I got friends who say, okay, Nadita, why you still got a job? Because they scared to fire me. And so that's why. And Brandon, yes, you say that quite frankly, all the time. I need y'all to do the work. I so much appreciate you showing up for us today. I really do. But we started this because the criminalization that is placed on our community of people of color, people who are sick and need our help, instead of us shunning away from them, we need to stop locking our doors, grabbing our pocketbooks and all of this other shit, excuse my French, because we are scared of people who we don't even know. And I know this happens because I've been guilty of it myself. But it took me, especially from my black sisters and brothers, it took us to lose our son to let us know that this shit is real, right? It's real. So don't wait till you're looking over in a box before you get up off your ass and do something. Do something. There are so many communities and so many organizations out here that are doing the work. If you don't march, if you don't protest, if you're not willing to take a bullet, if you're not willing to take the tear gas, do something, please. Because we are dying. And I mean that literally. We are fucking dying. We are tired of it. Too many mothers are in my position, and they wait until they are in my position before they get up off their ass and do something. Do something. I don't care if you give $5, $10, $50, no dollars of food. Clothes are unhoused because it's getting cold outside. We know that. It's getting cold outside. We know we're gonna lose some people. Get off your ass and do something. If you gotta sneak and do it, do it. But do it, please. Like, I don't know how many times we gotta keep begging y'all to help save our fucking lives. They are killing us like at will. It's just, it's a done deal. How do you put 13 bullets in somebody and then go home and sleep at night? I don't know. And if you think it's all right, then think about the family member that is not here with you tonight. Because somebody thinking real ill. Real ill. We got people that are out there that are literally dying. And if I don't say anything else tonight, for each of you that are sitting up there, I appreciate you. I love you. I know you are in this fight with us. right? So I need y'all to just use all of what, I mean, like, for real, all of y'all shit, I need y'all to get up on it. Help save the lives of my grandson, my granddaughters, fucking me, my mother, and definitely my husband. I'm asking y'all to do it.
Thank you so much, Anita. One of the things that we have to realize is that the reason for this event is a memorial because it was 5 years ago today that Abdul was killed, was murdered, okay? And so I have nothing but respect, and I was not going to miss this event. Nothing but respect for any mother and any father who in their grief decides that the way that they're going to honor their son is to hold an event where they try to make sure that no one else's son is murdered. And so, thank you, Nadita. Thank you, Kamal, for loving us so much. So that actually, Nadita, got to the last question that we'll ask for today. What should we do right now? Some of us, we're engaged, we're energized, we've learned some new information, possibly some things they didn't know. I know that I learned some things I didn't know. What do we do from this point? So we'll start with.
So one thing we get to talk about is recidivism. And it's easy to talk about all these different things because there's so many different issues to deal with. I mean, we can take these metal detectors and law enforcement and this big law enforcement presence in our public schools. We can take that out of the schools. We can actually provide wraparound services for those folks who are incarcerated that are returning back into the community so we can really affect the recidivism. We can actually restore voting rights, right? Like real voting rights. No probation, no parole, nothing. But the one thing that we all can do, everybody sitting in this room, is we can stop being safe. Safe is not saving our lives. And when I say safe, I don't care if you're a teacher, I don't care if you're an administrator, if you are a CEO, if you are an elected official, whoever you are. Martin Luther King said there comes a time when you do something not because it's popular, not because it's political, not because it's safe, but because your conscience tells you it's right. And we are too busy being safe because we want to keep our position so we don't shake this tree, or we don't push the envelope, or we don't ruffle feathers. We don't do any of these things while people are still dying and being incarcerated at massive levels. But we are comfortable in each and every one of our seats and positions. So take the safe shit and throw it out the window, because safe isn't keeping us alive. So if you have to turn up, because she's absolutely right. When I get up and talk as a black man, an elected official, yes, it sounds good coming from me. They expect it to come from me. But when one of my white brothers or sisters, because I don't have allies, anybody willing to stand with me in a fight is a family member. So when I have my white brothers and sisters that actually stand up, when Peter stands up on the floor and says something that I should have said or they expected me to say, the room gets quiet. So whatever we have to do in order to be unsafe and make sure that you are unapologetic in your stance in your fight for black lives and those that come from poor communities and those disenfranchised and marginalized communities, outside of me being unapologetically black, you gotta be unapologetic in your stance for it. So we could talk about all these things that we could do and we should be doing all of them, but stop being safe.
Yeah, and that's a great answer. I think Bruce is right that part of the problem with this conversation is that there are so many different places that we have to address. Our criminal justice system is not just about criminal justice. It's about mental health, it's about education, it's about social services, it's about poverty, it's about housing. All of these things come together in this conversation, and it's really difficult to say, here's the thing that we have to do. Because the fact of the matter is we have to attack all of those problems. But for me, I think that perhaps where I look first is taking money out of it by getting rid of cash bags. And finding some alternative way to make sure that we're not keeping people in jail prior to a conviction unless there is a really damn good reason if they are a danger to somebody. But we also have to start really looking at our criminal system as trying to address and fix problems, trying to restore harm, rather than just about punishing people that we think did something bad. Because that process really does just perpetuate itself. It takes people out of families, it leaves kids without parents, without resources, it leaves people with one income, often less than one income, and really just creates more of the same problems that got us there in the first place. But especially when we're talking about crimes like drug use and possession. We gotta stop treating that as a criminal problem and start treating it as a health problem, because that's what it is. And honestly, I think that is one of the most significant problems in our criminal justice system right now. It's that too often we're looking to just punish people for breaking a law and not looking at why the law is there and whether there's something else we should do instead of just locking people up. And if nothing else, if we can start asking ourselves that question as we're looking at our laws and how we deal with people with responses to crime, it's what is actually going to make this problem better rather than what is going to make us feel like we punished somebody. That's the question we've got to be asking every day.
Just ask everybody to dream big. I don't know if we're ever going to have 50% of the teachers in schools to be people of color, which means that white teachers have to get it. And we are so used to our Midwestern niceness that we don't want to talk about racism. And we like whisper it in spaces. And like, this is the moment to talk about it. If in America, black towns were profiting off the bodies of white people being incarcerated, you can't even imagine that. You can't imagine a prison in Kinlaw with all black people making middle-class salaries, whether they have a college education or not, and all white people filling those jails, right? But we can imagine it in rural white America because that's what happens, right? We can't imagine any school in St. Louis not educating white children. We can't even imagine that. And so if we don't have a conversation about racism, because that's what this conversation is about, Dr. Griffin talked about policing happened because of slavery. We didn't even have police prior to slavery. So it is a system built on racism, and we can't ask it to change unless we're asking it to change, and that will take all of us. We need white teachers to get it for themselves just as much as we need white officers to get it. And I would just, off of Senator Nasheed's question, I would want all of us to ask ourselves, because it is a system, how are we all being used as pawns in the system to keep it in place? Because that gives us direction of what we can do to dismantle it. And I don't mean like, because I'm going to say this again, we are so used to St. Louis just being good. Oh, it's better than it was. Like, fuck that shit.
Right.
Why don't we go for like awesome? Like, this is the place people want to fucking live. People from DC and Chicago are coming and saying, because we're so fucking awesome here. So we can't even imagine that everyone's trying to run from here. What if we dug our roots deep here in St. Louis and fought like hell for what we want? So do something.
So I'm gonna answer it two ways. Personally, the way to make it better. As y'all can see, my children are over there. Every year, my children are in attendance. Every year for Thanksgiving, my children go out and feed the community. We don't have Thanksgiving at home. We go to the community and feed the people that are on Olive, all lined up. That's what we do every year. My youngest daughter, 10 years old, asked this year, can we raise money so we can not only give them food, but give them coats and gloves and everything else. So that's the personal way that we can do it. Everybody that has children should have brought their children. Because while we're trying not to have these conversations with our kids thinking it's going to protect them, Tamar was my son's age when he got killed. So we can't try to protect them and shield them from what's out there because nobody else is going to protect them or shield them. And the people that are meant to do that are going to be the main ones that kill them, just like they did my brother. So I can't have my kids being in denial about what's going on in society. They have to know exactly what it is. Professionally, every person that we bailed out, we interview them. And that interview is not to see whether or not we're going to bail you out because we're going to bail you out. We don't care what your crime was. But we interview you to find out, do you have a mental illness? Do you need shelter? Do you need education? Do you need a job? So that way when we bail you out, we're giving you one of those resources so you don't have a chance to go back into the system. So I think that the community of St. Louis, the way how everyone stood together for Mike Brown, you need to stand together for your neighbor and your own child. So if we can do that, then yes, St. Louis will be that city that everybody wants to come to. Because my family is not from St. Louis. And the first question I always get asked is, what the hell made you come to St. Louis? So if St. Louis people are asking me that, then y'all need to look at yourselves and see what the hell made you stay. So if you have a reason that's making you stay, if the people in the hood want to fight for this is my block, with the next street over, we don't fuck with them, then that's the same attitude you need to have about everything else. And everybody else needs to come together and drop, oh, this is my block, or this is my hood, or I'm from this side, or whatever, and come together because we are not your enemies. The enemies is who we supposed to be looking at for help.
Yeah, so,
Almost out of time.
yeah, let me just say this because I go back and eat. I will leave you with this here though. If you hadn't heard anything I said tonight, understand that the political process is something that we need to engage in. Because you see time and time again, individuals saying to each and every one of us that our vote doesn't count. Oh, why should I vote? It doesn't count. But the question you have to ask those individuals is, if your vote doesn't count, why do they try so hard to suppress it? I mean, straight up. I mean, if your vote really doesn't count, why do they try so hard to suppress your vote? That is like the most hard question that you have to ask those individuals that will tell you that their vote doesn't count. Because their vote does. Everything about your life depends on policies. If a man cannot pay child support, guess what? He becomes a felon. His license is being stripped from him because he cannot pay child support. But that's a policy. When a young man goes to prison and come out and knock on the doors of opportunities and the doors are slammed in his face because he's an ex-felon and he can't get food stamps, he can't live in low-income housing, that's a policy. Everything that impacts our quality of life is legislated on. It's a policy. So you have to let those individuals know that you cannot continue to say that your vote doesn't count. Because every vote counts. Look what's happening in Atlanta. Are you guys seeing what's happening in Atlanta? What about the guy, what's his name, Andrew? Look what's happening.
and legislation. So don't ever let anyone tell you, if a kid, a millennial, or whoever they are, my vote doesn't count. You make them understand that based on their social security number, their vote counts. Thank you.
Well, I would say what we need to do is look at the issue individually. We've talked about it being multifaceted. There are so many different things that need to be done. There's not any one thing. So my suggestion is care enough to want to make a change and to be that change that you want to see. There is nothing that is going to happen because somebody should do it. We often take that perspective. It's always somebody else that should do it. We have to individually take responsible for some aspect of this. If it is changing the way you address children, if it's demanding the responses from our legislators, if it is getting out, again, someone mentioned before, getting out protesting, resisting, whatever it takes. But personally, take responsibility for changing some aspect of this system.
So we're wrapping up, and I would just want to also remind you there's lots of learning opportunities that you can take, including like witnessing whiteness and various programs through the YMCA. The biggest thing is do something. I often, when I do my training, I tell people, you know, if anyone tells you that this is the right way to do it, that's not the only way. As Dr. Griffin said, as Ms. Hunter said, as Mr. Frank said, there is a lot of work to do. I think you also said that. There's a lot of work to do. Do something.
Okay, so real quick, so you have a balloon, right? Because we typically do a balloon release. And I only did 50, but man, oh man, I'm so glad I ran out. Because that means y'all showed up, right? My husband I told him 2 minutes, right? Just to say something real quick. Do you want to do that when we're outside, honey? Go ahead, Mo.
I was going to say that it ain't no big deal. Well, it is a big deal. The conscience, I just want to talk about the conscience, and then we'll take a minute. When you leave here, make a change in the sense of care about people. Like you heard all these people talk about the situation and the problem, but we leave and then do the same stuff we've been doing. And it don't, and then you be at the next meeting with the same hand somebody over. Let's not waste this conversation. You heard, let's care about each other, let's participate, let's stop saying, you know, all these ads on TV about when you hire somebody, check the criminal background check. Listen, Amanda did this time, let's move on, because I started Tuesday after Christie's thing, we go back to work. Young men need work, they need work, they gotta go to work, they gotta feed their families. And stop turning your nose up, stop turning your face up. This country was founded by crooks, straight up crooks, straight crooks. So we need to stop frowning our faces and stop turning our noses up to each other and reach out. These young guys got to work. Try to give somebody a chance, man. Just stop being such a hard ass. That's all.
Still checking.
A minute for the
Operation up.
We're going to release some balloons because we've done it for the last 3 years. And just let that dude know we came, brother. Gotcha. incarceration. We're going to end fucking cash bail. We're going to end it, and we're going to start right now today. Right? Oh! Thank you.